they don't expect you to fight back when they've already written your ending for you. When a quiet, grounded Air Force lieutenant takes the colonel's seat for a laugh, she accidentally uncovers a buried sabotage plot that could bring down her entire base. With her reputation already hanging by a thread and enemies hiding behind smiles, she must risk everything to expose the truth and reclaim what was stolen. Will the team see her as a hero or the threat they always feared? Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're tuning in from, and be sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story will leave you absolutely speechless. Jennifer Fleming's hands were steady, but she kept them in her pockets anyway as she crossed the wide expanse of sun-bleached tarmac. Her steps were even, measured. She didn't hurry, didn't glance over her shoulder, didn't let her chin dip under the scrutiny of a dozen pairs of eyes that watched her from the shade of hangar doors and the open backs of maintenance trucks. She knew exactly how she looked in her faded flight jacket with her regulation short brown hair curling around her jaw. A little too lean, a little too alert, like someone still waiting for the next surprise attack. No one called out to her. No one smiled or nodded or even looked away. And that was a message all its own. Jennifer's reputation had made it to Liberty Ridge before she did. That was the way of these remote posts, especially one like this, halfway between nothing and nowhere, where boredom bred stories and every new face was a threat or an opportunity, sometimes both. 6 weeks ago, she'd transferred in. On paper, at least, the journey was supposed to be a temporary assignment. Technical support, avionics recalibration, diagnostics, non-highlight duties. The official reason was medical, but Jennifer had stopped reading her own paperwork years ago. It all said the same thing, not fit for active sorties under prolonged stress. As if stress was a disease. As if it could ever be separate from flying. She was used to the limbo. Used to being somewhere between the break room and the flight line, too skilled to ignore, too suspect to trust. Used to waking before sunrise, lacing her boots with methodical care, and walking straight into a room where the best she could hope for was polite dismissal. At least here, in the desert heat and glare, it was all out in the open. No one was pretending. From the corner of her eye, she saw the colonel's staff car roll up, a dust cloud fanning behind it like a curtain being pulled aside. The doors opened and out stepped Colonel John Ransom, Liberty Ridge's own living legend, all broad shoulders and iron-jawed resolve. Jennifer didn't need to look to know the hush that fell across the line. Even the junior crew chief stiffened when he walked by. He wore his reputation like armor, and every step announced command. But Jennifer had known men like him before. Heroes to some, cautionary tales to others. He was the kind of officer who didn't need to raise his voice, because everyone listened just the same. She kept walking, pretending not to notice the small group of pilots clustered under the overhang, their backs pressed against the shade, hands wrapped around their coffee or scribbling on flight plans. Their conversation died as she neared, replaced by the electric silence of people hoping not to be drawn into something dangerous or contagious. She could almost hear the words they didn't say. That's her. That's the one from Whiteman. That's the one who cracked in the simulator and grounded an entire squadron. Never mind that the truth was nothing like that, that what happened was classified, that her own testimony had been taken in a room with no windows and an officer who wouldn't meet her eyes. None of it mattered. A rumor was easier to remember than a record. Jennifer paused at the edge of the maintenance bay. The air inside was thick with jet fuel and sweat and the metallic tang of solvent. Staff Sergeant Tyler Brooks was already hunched over the diagnostic panel of an F-15, sleeves rolled up, the tattoo of a dragonfly climbing up his forearm. He didn't look up, but he didn't need to. He'd seen her coming in, the reflection of the canopy glass. "You're early," he said, not turning around. His voice was easy, practiced, not friendly exactly, but not hostile. "I like to see the mess before everyone else wakes up," Jennifer replied. She tried to keep it light, but Brooks just grunted, the way men do when they've decided to say nothing at all. "Colonel wants his flagship tuned before 06, he said. "Threat update, systems check, the whole nine." She nodded, moving past him to her workstation. He didn't ask if she needed help. She didn't expect him to. Her toolkit was already waiting, laid out with the military precision that never quite left her fingers. As she worked, the routine settled in. The click of the tablet as she loaded new threat libraries, the muted chime as she cycled through diagnostics, the low hum of her own mind spinning through possibilities. This was the only place, lately, that made sense. Here, elbow deep in circuitry, reading the heartbeat of the machine. The other techs filtered in. Hannah Lee, always with her earbuds in. Greg Sanders with his hands stuffed deep in his pockets, eyes averted. They didn't speak, but Jennifer could feel their glances, could sense the half-curious, half-fearful questions ticking behind their foreheads. She kept her head down, finishing the calibrations, logging her changes with painstaking clarity. She knew exactly what would happen if anything went wrong. The blame would follow the path of least resistance, and in this place that meant her. Outside, she could hear the colonel's voice, sharp, direct, a hammer striking steel. Orders ricocheted off the hangar walls. "Make it sing," he barked, and every tech, every pilot, every crew chief in earshot straightened a little, as if his words alone could tune engines. Jennifer saw him stride past the bay doors, his eyes never lingering on her, not even for a second. She wondered if he recognized her at all, or if she was just another name on the roster, another problem inherited from command. In her old life, in another theater, she'd have challenged a man like Ransom to a dogfight, just to see who blinked first. Now she was invisible. Better invisible, she reminded herself, than infamous. Later, as the sun climbed and the bass grew louder, Jennifer finished the last of her work and wiped her hands on a rag that smelled like 1,000 refuelings. Brooks had wandered off to check inventory, leaving her alone with the silent planes and the far-off hum of the flight line. She stood, stretching her shoulders, looking out past the nose cones toward the perimeter fence. From this angle, she could almost pretend the world was simple. A row of aircraft, a row of tasks, a line drawn between sky and earth. But she could feel the storm coming, even if the weather was clear. Not in the air, not yet, but in the restless way the base moved, in the snap of orders, and the tension beneath every conversation. Something was shifting, something big, and she was caught in its undertow whether she wanted to be or not. The barracks that night were quieter than usual. Jennifer sat on the edge of her bunk, boots unlaced, staring at the wall. Her roommate, a young logistics lieutenant with a face still too open for this kind of life, tried and failed to break the silence. "You could come out with us," the woman said, uncertainty coloring her voice. "A few of us are hitting the mess for cards. Get your mind off the job, maybe?" Jennifer shook her head. "I'm fine," she said, and she meant it. She didn't need company. She needed time. Time to remember who she was before they started writing her story for her. She lay back, eyes on the ceiling, letting her thoughts spiral through old missions and new disappointments. She remembered the first time she'd flown solo, the cockpit controls soft and sure under her hands, the air above the world cool and infinite. She remembered the second, and the third, and every flight since. The day she lost her wings was the day she'd started counting time in ground hours, not air miles. At Liberty Ridge, time moved strangely. Each day blurred into the next, punctuated by the sharp relief of duty rosters and the monotonous rhythm of maintenance checks. Yet beneath the surface, Jennifer could feel something gathering. A pressure, a need, a sense that soon someone would have to do what no one else wanted. She wondered, not for the first time, if she would be ready. At dawn, the base woke with a shudder, the engines of ambition revving to life. Jennifer walked the perimeter alone, passing the silent fighters gleaming in the thin light, the flag snapping in the wind. She found herself pausing at the end of the flight line, fingers trailing along the cool metal skin of a jet she'd helped keep alive. It was the only place on the whole base where she felt safe, or at least honest. That morning, as she signed off on her logs and watched the crews move with restless energy, Jennifer felt the weight of ice, the weight of expectation, the old ache of being an outsider who still remembered what it meant to belong. She squared her shoulders, drew a breath, and walked back toward the center of the storm, her path set not by orders, but by stubborn memory and the faint, impossible hope that tomorrow would be different. In the shadows of Liberty Ridge, laughter traveled faster than rumor, and rumor was faster than truth. But Jennifer Fleming was nothing if not patient. She could wait them out. She could outlast the weather, the suspicion, the silence. After all, she'd done it before. And in the silent, waiting hour before the world truly woke, Jennifer realized something else. She was not afraid. Not of them, not of the past, not of the seat that waited, empty and full of promise, at the head of the flight line. Because sooner or later every seat is filled, and every story is told. And Jennifer Fleming, for all her ghosts and all her scars, knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. Jennifer Fleming stood at the edge of the flight line, her breath fogging in the cool air. The orange tinge of morning gave way to harsh desert light, baking the base in heat and mirage. The routine had a rhythm, but every day it felt as if some cord was stretched tighter than the last. She could sense it in the way the pilots glanced toward the horizon, or the way the mechanics' voices dropped when she passed. Something was building, unseen, and she felt the pressure behind her eyes. Inside the hangar, aircraft waited like restless animals, poised and silent, their fuselages gleaming under the harsh strip lights. Jennifer could read the tension in the crews as clearly as she read the serial numbers stenciled on each jet. Brooks moved with even more purpose, his boots echoing against the concrete. He was talking to Specialist Greg Sanders, both men hunched over a diagnostics tablet, muttering in code that was half jargon, half anxiety. Across the tarmac the pilots gathered, a tight knot of uniforms and clipped conversations. Captain Mike Harper was there, tall and broad, his aviator sunglasses perched on his head, always smiling a bit too wide. Beside him was Lieutenant Chris Delaney, the youngest of the group, quick-witted and nervous, clutching his flight bag as if it might anchor him to the earth. Their laughter was too loud, Jennifer noticed, echoing out in the thin air. A way to chase away dread or fill the silence between the waiting and the work. Jennifer had learned to move quietly, to slip between the cracks. She caught sight of Major Lisa Armstrong, the weather officer, arguing with a member of operations staff near the mission board. Armstrong's voice was clipped. "Those cells are shifting faster than forecast," she said, jabbing a finger at the radar printout. "If they don't move that launch window, you'll have more than turbulence to worry about." Her words hovered for a moment, a warning no one wanted to hear. Jennifer felt a spark of sympathy for Armstrong. Out here the elements were another enemy, one that cared nothing for rank or reputation. She wondered if the others saw it the same way, or if they believed, as so many did, that willpower could bend the wind. Colonel Ransom arrived just after 700, striding through the controlled chaos with the certainty of a man who believed in the order of things, especially the order he imposed. His reputation walked in before him. The younger crew stiffened at the sight of his square frame, broad-shouldered and upright even in the sun-faded uniform. He barked a greeting to Brooks, clapped Harper on the shoulder, then turned to scan the line of aircraft with eyes that missed nothing. Jennifer observed him with a practiced neutrality. There was something magnetic about his presence, the way every conversation dipped and altered when he passed, but she sensed the volatility beneath the surface. His temper was famous, and his results more so. She didn't fear him. She had seen enough of the world to know which kind of authority she respected and which she simply endured. Still, she felt the electric charge in the air whenever he drew near, as if his approval was a currency everyone else was desperate to earn. Mid-morning, as Jennifer worked on a radio array, Brooks approached. "Colonel wants a word," he said. His eyes flicked sideways. "Alone." Jennifer wiped her hands and followed Brooks through the tangle of cables and flight suits to the shadowed side of the hangar. Ransom waited, arms folded across his chest, a scowl fixed beneath his close-cropped hair. "Lieutenant Fleming," he said, voice measured but edged. "You've been here 6 weeks. I hear the systems are running smoother than ever." He did not phrase it as a compliment. "But I also hear you've been making decisions without running them up the chain. Like last night with the diagnostic on Ironhawk 3. Jennifer met his gaze. "There was a surge in the pressure readings. I flagged it, then recalibrated the regulator. Crew Chief Brooks signed off on the patch." "Chain of command matters," Ransom replied, his tone flat. "You've got a file thick as my arm and a medical eval that says you don't handle pressure. Maybe you want to prove something." His voice lowered, the next words for her alone. "I don't need mavericks. I need discipline." Jennifer felt her jaw tighten, but she didn't flinch. "With respect, sir, I follow protocol. Except when protocol slows down what needs fixing. I log every change. I take responsibility." For a moment she thought he might explode. Instead, he simply nodded once, a sharp movement. "If anything fails out there, it's on you. Don't forget that." Then he walked away, boots crunching against the hangar floor, and the conversation was over. Brooks raised an eyebrow as they watched Ransom go. "He's tough on everyone," Brooks said, trying to sound reassuring. But Jennifer only shrugged. "I don't need him to like me," she said. "I just need the birds to fly." But even as she turned back to her work, the Colonel's words echoed in her mind. There was always a moment, a split second, where everything could go wrong, and when it did, it never mattered who had signed which form. All that mattered was the truth. Did the work hold? The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. The forecast was getting worse, and Major Armstrong's warnings proved right. Dark clouds rolled over the desert horizon, pulled along by winds that howled down from distant mountains. The crews rushed to prepare the strike fighters, voices tense and clipped. Harper tried to keep things light, but even he grew serious as the checks dragged on. Delaney nearly dropped his helmet, caught himself, and muttered something under his breath that no one answered. Jennifer's own nerves hummed as she moved from plane to plane, checking relays and updating threat libraries. She worked with the intensity of someone who knows the ground beneath them is not entirely stable, but she never let her hands shake, never let her mind wander. She was aware, always, of the invisible line that separated her from the others. She heard it in the way they called her ma'am, with just enough distance, in the way they hesitated before asking a question. And she had been on the wrong side of that line before. It no longer stung as much as it once had, but it never stopped being lonely. A few hours before the next scheduled sortie, the storm hit. It rolled in on a low rumble of thunder, pushing sand and wind through every open crack. The sky darkened, the ground seemed to tremble, and everyone hustled to secure what they could. Jennifer found herself alone in the maintenance bay, watching the dust spiral in the pale light, her heart thumping in her chest for reasons she couldn't quite name. She thought of the stories she'd heard in the early days of flight school. Tales told in darkened ready rooms, how some pilots claimed they could feel a coming storm in their bones, a pressure that built and built until it broke loose and everything changed. She had always dismissed it as superstition, but now, standing at the edge of the chaos, she understood. The world shifted just before it snapped. In the mess hall that evening, conversation was subdued. Pilots nursed coffee, mechanics leaned into their plates. The TV in the corner droned on about weather advisories. Jennifer ate quickly, her mind elsewhere. She noticed Harper watching her from across the room. his face unreadable for once. Delaney joined him, whispering something, and both glanced her way before dropping their gazes. She was nearly finished when Major Armstrong slipped into the seat beside her. "Rough day?" Armstrong said, voice soft. Jennifer nodded. "Forecast isn't great for the morning." "It'll pass," Armstrong replied. She hesitated, then added, "You did the right thing with that regulator. Not everyone here would have caught it." Jennifer let out a slow breath. "Doesn't always feel like it matters." "It does," Armstrong said, "especially to the ones flying the damn things." There was a pause. A rare, unguarded moment. Armstrong stood, adjusting her uniform, and offered a faint smile. "You know, the weather always clears. Eventually." Jennifer nodded, holding that thought close, even as she gathered her tray and left the mess. Outside, the storm was already easing, though the air was thick and electric. She stood for a moment, looking out at the runway lit by harsh security lamps, the aircraft sitting like sentinels in the gloom. She thought of the invisible boundaries, the rumors that followed her like shadows, the laughter and silence she'd endured. She was a stranger here, maybe always would be, but she felt a flicker of stubborn hope all the same. In the days ahead, she knew, storms would come and go. Respect would be hard won, if it came at all. But Jennifer Fleming wasn't done fighting. And something told her that soon everything would change, not just for her, but for everyone at Liberty Ridge. The question wasn't if the storm would pass, but what would remain standing when it did. It started, as so many stories on a base do, with a dare that didn't sound like one. At first it was just a murmur at the coffee urn, someone muttering that the new lieutenant was too careful, too quiet, too stiff to ever pull a joke, let alone take one. By the time lunch rolled around, the comment had grown teeth. Now it was a question, repeated in the hangar, disguised as banter. Would Jennifer Fleming ever loosen up, or was she just a shadow haunting the maintenance bay? That afternoon, the pilot's ready room buzzed with an edge of nervous energy. The coming launch, the fading storm, the restless wait for orders. These were the ingredients of boredom, and boredom was dangerous in a place full of people who'd spent their lives defying it. Chris Delaney slouched in his chair, boots kicked up, while Harper leaned back with a magazine he wasn't reading. Brooks, dropping by to double-check a manifest, caught the tail end of the conversation and smirked. "He's not so bad," Brooks said, not quite defending Jennifer, not quite joining in either. "Knows her stuff, at least." "Maybe she does," Harper replied, grinning. "But you got to admit, she's like a ghost around here. No one's ever seen her do anything but work." Delaney chimed in, eager for the camaraderie. "I say she couldn't take a joke if it bit her. She'd file a maintenance request for it." Even Armstrong, stopping by with updated weather sheets, seemed to pick up on the current. "If you want a storm to clear, maybe you should get Fleming to stare at it. Even clouds would give up." The laughter was easy, not quite mean, but Jennifer's name carried a peculiar charge, a blend of curiosity and unease, as if just speaking it might conjure up the rumors they all pretended to ignore. In the bay, Jennifer was elbow-deep in the guts of Iron Hawk 1, Colonel Ransom's flagship, when Brooks found her. He watched her for a moment, her concentration absolute, her movements methodical, and wondered, not for the first time, what went on behind those steady eyes. He set down a toolbox, letting the clang announce his presence. "Pilots are betting you wouldn't last 5 minutes in the hot seat," he said, voice casual. "Some of them think you're allergic to anything with a rank on it." Jennifer arched an eyebrow, not looking up. "I'm allergic to bad maintenance and coffee that tastes like engine degreaser. Otherwise, I'm fine." Brooks grinned, glad she was playing along. "They said no one but Ransom ever sits in the colonel's seat. They say it's cursed, or maybe it's just got his shape permanently imprinted in it." Jennifer finally looked at him, lips quirked. "What are you getting at, Sergeant?" Harper said if you took the colonel's seat, even for a second, he'd buy the next 3 rounds at the O Club. She wiped her hands, her smile thin. And you want to see me take him up on it? I want to see them surprised for once, Brooks said quietly. Besides, you could use a win. The challenge hung there, silly and harmless on the surface, but Jennifer could feel the gravity beneath it. To everyone else it was a prank, just a harmless joke, a way to pass the time. But to her, it was a line, another invisible boundary. Crossing it meant more than sitting down. It meant daring them to see her differently. She weighed the risk. Ransom would be out on the perimeter for another half hour, checking security and barking at MPs. The hangar was busy but not chaotic. Most of the maintenance staff had moved outside, dragged by a rumor of a malfunctioning drone. And in the ready room, Harper and Delaney would have a front row seat. Jennifer flexed her fingers and let out a slow breath. Fine, she said. Let's see if the seat bites. Word traveled fast. A silent wave. Delaney peered through the bay doors, phone in hand, ready to record the moment for posterity. Or blackmail. Harper leaned forward, eyes bright. Even Armstrong, passing by with a sheaf of mission updates, paused at the threshold, her skepticism written clear across her face. Jennifer approached the aircraft's portable command unit, where the colonel's seat sat beneath a canopy of flickering screens. She paused, feeling the eyes on her, the hush of anticipation. The seat was just a chair. Worn leather, creaking joints, the faint imprint of authority, but it felt like a throne, or a trap. She slid into it in one smooth movement, her back straight, her hands on the armrests. The seat was warm from the sun, not magic, not haunted. But the reaction was immediate. Harper whooped. Delaney's phone captured every second. Brooks gave her a slow clap. Someone at the far end of the bay started laughing, the sound rolling outward in disbelief. Jennifer raised an eyebrow, refusing to play into the spectacle. She pressed a button on the console, more out of habit than bravado, and the display flickered to life. She spoke into the comms headset, her voice low and steady. "This is Fleming, running system check on Ironhawk 1. The laughter changed pitch, a touch of surprise bleeding into the amusement. It was one thing to sit, it was another to sound so at home. Armstrong shook her head, a rare smile twitching at the corner of her mouth. But something unexpected happened. The panel in front of Jennifer beeped, a high, insistent tone she'd only ever heard once before. An alert scrolled across the main display, bright red. System failed. Warning. Jennifer's training took over. She scanned the codes, mind racing, hydraulic pressure anomaly, regulator under duress. It was exactly what she'd flagged in her logs yesterday, only now the failure had advanced. Brooks hurried over, concern replacing amusement. "That's new," he muttered. Jennifer leaned into the mic again, her voice shifting from dry to sharp. "This is Fleming. Ironhawk 1 reporting a live system fault, possible regulator breach." Harper's smile faded as the implications dawned. Delaney stopped recording. Armstrong, her weather reports forgotten, strode forward, brow furrowed. "How bad?" she asked. "Could be catastrophic if it fails on launch," Jennifer replied. She pointed to the readings. "If this had happened in flight, you'd lose engine pressure, possibly the bird." The prank, such as it was, evaporated. The mood in the hangar changed instantly. Laughter replaced by urgency. Even those who doubted her now watched as she walked the crew through the fault, explaining with crisp, calm precision what had to be done. She paged the maintenance chief, logged the emergency, and supervised the rapid replacement of the failing part. Colonel Ransom returned to the hangar to find a crisis contained, the culprit identified, and the air electric with a new kind of energy. He stopped at the edge of the crowd, taking in the scene. For a long moment he said nothing, his eyes shifting from the open command unit to Jennifer standing at its center. "What's going on?" Ransom demanded. Brooks stepped forward, summing it up in a few words. "Lieutenant Fleming just saved your flagship, sir." Ransom's gaze lingered on Jennifer. Unreadable. There was a charge in the air that felt different from the usual tension. He nodded once, curt but unmistakable. "Carry on." The words echoed in the hangar. The pilots drifted away, subdued. Brooks shot Jennifer a look of genuine respect. Harper, for the first time, seemed unsure of himself, rubbing the back of his neck. Delaney tucked away his phone, looking a little sheepish. Jennifer let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She stood, every eye in the bay following her, not with suspicion now, but with something closer to recognition. She felt the weight of the seat still pressed into her back, the aftershock of being seen not as a rumor or a risk, but as a part of the team. That night, the story spread through Liberty Ridge. They laughed when she sat in the colonel's seat, until they saw what happened next. In the darkness, under a sky still bruised by the remnants of the storm, Jennifer Fleming felt the balance of things tilt. Not enough to change everything. Not yet, but enough that, for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. And if anyone asked why she'd done it, she'd only smile and say, "Sometimes you have to sit in the seat to prove you belong." The alarm sounded just after midnight. Not the distant warble of a practice drill or the dry staccato of scheduled tests, but a full, rising, bass-wide klaxon that turned every hallway light red and every breath sharp. Jennifer Fleming was already half awake when it started, lying stiff in her bunk with the kind of tension that never really left her body anymore. The second the siren pierced the stillness, she was on her feet, boots on, jacket halfway zipped, moving on instinct alone. Outside, the corridors of the barracks thudded with motion. Doors banged open, voices clipped commands. Someone shouted for a helmet, another cursed as a flashlight fumbled and hit the floor. The power hadn't gone out, but it might as well have. Everyone's eyes were trying to adjust to panic before reason could catch up. Jennifer didn't ask questions. She just moved. At the hangar, Colonel Ransom arrived at nearly the same time, flanked by two aides and trailed by Major Armstrong, her face pale, her hands gripping a data tablet that flickered with raw telemetry. Ransom's expression was carved from stone. If he was surprised to see Jennifer already standing at the diagnostic console, sleeves rolled, headset on, he didn't show it. "The USF Territorial Corps," the tablet said. "What have we got?" he barked. Armstrong answered, breathless. "It's the Iron Hawk Squadron. Launch protocol was triggered without a flight crew on deck. The system thinks it's a live scramble. We've got turbines warming, fuel feeds engaged, bay doors unlocking, and no authorization logged." "Sabotage?" Ransom asked. Jennifer was already typing, her eyes flicking from screen to screen. "Could be a fault in the launch management system, or someone keyed an outdated override. Either way, we're 60 seconds from one of those jets lighting up inside the bay, with no one at the stick." Ransom turned to her sharply. "Can you stop it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned into the mic, issuing a stop command. Nothing. The system didn't respond. A red light blinked on the console, mocking her. She tried again, bypassing standard protocol, digging deeper. "The firewall's looping," she muttered. "The overrides locked us out of manual abort. If we can't reroute the sequence in 30 seconds, Iron Hawk 2's engine is going to start dry-burning fuel inside a closed bay." Brooks and Sanders had shown up by now, both red-eyed and breathless, still zipping their uniforms. "Tell me what you need," Brooks said without preamble. "Get under the nose gear and shut the mechanical failsafe," Jennifer ordered. "That'll buy me time to kill the code from here." Brooks didn't hesitate. He grabbed a toolbox and was gone. Jennifer's fingers flew across the console. She dug into subroutines most people didn't even know existed, searching for the buried line of code that had been twisted into a recursive loop. The deeper she went, the more it looked intentional. This wasn't just an error. Someone had tampered with the emergency protocols. Her gut tightened. Whoever did this knew exactly how the system worked. More importantly, they knew how to make Jennifer look like the one who had failed to catch it. Behind her, Armstrong was explaining things to Ransom in clipped, urgent bursts. Something about electrical anomalies during the last firmware update, about chain of command protocol, about who had access to what. Jennifer tuned it out. There was only the screen, the flicker of danger, and the countdown ticking closer to catastrophe. Then she saw it. A ghosted process running beneath the main control scheme, hidden under 3 layers of system calls. It was a trigger, disguised as a patch, time-delayed, waiting for the right conditions to detonate chaos. And someone had embedded her login credentials into the metadata. Her pulse spiked, but her face stayed blank. If she stopped to explain now, they'd never get the engines shut down. First, save the plane, then fight the war behind the scenes. "I've got it," she said. "Killing ignition sequence, now." A soft whine filled the hangar as the turbine spin-up stuttered, then stopped. The temperature warning lights blinked yellow, then green. One by one, the Ironhawk status monitors dropped from critical to stable. A second later, Brooks' voice came through the hangar comms. "Fail-safe engaged, engines dead." Jennifer exhaled slowly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Around her, the tension began to leak out of the room in careful, measured breaths. The aides started murmuring into radios. Armstrong closed her tablet. Sanders sagged against the wall. Ransom said nothing. Jennifer turned, met his eyes. "It wasn't random," she said, voice low so only he could hear. "That was deliberate. Someone embedded a false sequence into the system, using my login. This was designed to frame me." His stare didn't waver. "Prove it." "I will." He gave a slight nod, then turned away, barking to the crew to secure the hangar and initiate a full sweep of the launch bay systems. The next hours passed in a blur of interviews, reports, and suspicion. Jennifer barely noticed the sunrise bleeding into the sky beyond the hangar. She submitted her own incident log, precise to the decimal, and filed a report detailing every keystroke she'd made. Still, she knew what some were thinking. She was the one in the seat. She was the one with the login. She was the one who'd already been marked as unstable. But she also knew something else now. This was more than personal. Someone on the base wanted her gone. Brooks approached her later, leaning on the wing of Ironhawk 2, rubbing at the grease on his knuckles. "You think they'll believe you?" She looked up at him, white lips. "They'll have to," she said. "There's a security trace, the original patch file's still on the backup server. I just need access." He hesitated. "You think it's someone from inside?" "I don't know," she said. "But I think they've done this before, just not to someone who knew how to fight back." Jennifer felt the familiar chill behind her ribs, the sensation she'd carried since that classified mission, the one that ended her flight career and buried her name in a sealed folder. That time, she hadn't seen it coming. This time, she would. That night, after the base quieted and the last report was logged, she stood in the empty hangar, looking out at the row of silent aircraft. Their sleek bodies reflected the dim lights like sleeping dragons. To most, they were weapons. To her, they were something else. Truth, memory, redemption. She walked down the line, hand brushing against each fusillade. Ironheart 1, 2, 3. Each jet she touched grounded her more firmly. Each one reminded her of what she used to be, and what she still was, beneath the rumors and restrictions and red tape. There was a saying among pilots, when everything fails, you fall back on your training. But Jennifer had learned something harder. When everyone doubts you, you fall back on yourself. Outside, the desert wind kicked up again, carrying the scent of fuel and sand and the whisper of unfinished business. She would find who tried to take her down. And she would make sure they remembered why Jennifer Fleming's name still carried weight, even if some had forgotten what it meant. There was a file locked behind 3 levels of clearance in the base's secure network, buried so deep it didn't even show up on the regular directory. Jennifer found it the way she found everything that wasn't meant to be found, not by breaking protocol, but by understanding how it bent. It was labeled with a string of numbers and a date she hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Just seeing it made her chest tighten. The mission was codenamed Hollow Trace. Officially, it had never happened. The op had gone sideways, and when the dust settled, Jennifer was the only pilot who'd walked away, technically. Her aircraft had landed without a scratch. Her voice had been calm in the debrief. Her reports had been flawless. And yet somehow, the blame had drifted her way like smoke looking for something to cling to. The others couldn't talk. Clearance levels too high, outcomes too classified. But someone had decided Jennifer Fleming couldn't be trusted. Not anymore. She sat alone in the systems lab now, late at night, the glow of the terminal washing her face in sterile light. The air was still, save for the occasional click of her fingers on the keyboard. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her like gravity, whether to open the file, dig deeper, risk what little standing she had left. But something inside her had shifted after the launch override. They weren't just sidelining her anymore. They were aiming to bury her for good. She entered her access code, hit confirm, and held her breath. The file unfolded slowly, its contents unspooling across the screen. Communications logs, telemetry, pilot vitals, mission overlays, and at the center of it all, one transmission she remembered but had never been allowed to reference. A split-second call she'd made to abort an approach when something didn't look right, even though command had ordered her to continue. She had overridden the directive, and saved 2 lives in doing so. But instead of being commended, her reaction had been reframed as panic. They'd written it up as evidence of emotional impairment under duress. She'd been sent to a military psychologist who'd said her decision-making was technically sound, but suggestive of long-term instability. The diagnosis that followed wasn't a medical truth. It was a political solution. Jennifer leaned back in the chair, heart thudding. She could feel the fury building in her chest. Not the raw, useless kind, but the cold, steady kind that came from betrayal. Whoever had planted the launch override, whoever had used her login, wasn't just trying to ruin her day. They were betting she'd be too worn down to fight. She wasn't. Across the hangar the next morning, the mood had shifted. The alert had left a bruise, a collective unease no one could quite shake. Pilots were quieter. The maintenance crew double-checked every tool and cable. Even Harper, who usually filled every room with his laugh, looked uneasy. Jennifer moved through it all without speaking unless necessary, her focus sharpened to a blade. Brooks found her near the back of Ironhawk 3, reviewing the turbine diagnostics. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," she replied. He hesitated. "You find anything?" Jennifer glanced around, then handed him a small data stick. "This is part of the launch override sequence from last night. Someone ran a ghosted shell under my credentials. I pulled it from the backup logs before they could wipe it." Brooks stared at it. "You gonna bring it to Ransom?" "I will," she said, "but not yet. Not until I know who did it." "You think it's someone on base?" Jennifer nodded. "Has to be. They had access to restricted firmware layers. That kind of precision doesn't come from outside. Someone here wants me gone, and they're willing to risk a $45 million 0-cents jet to do it." He whistled under his breath. Hell of a way to start a turf war. She allowed a grim smile. "This isn't about turf. This is about history." Later that day, while the flight crew prepped for an evening sortie, Jennifer ducked into the communications tower. It was a risk being seen somewhere so far outside her official purview, but she needed to see the security feeds from the hangar. Specifically, the 10-minute window before the ignition sequence triggered. She found Specialist Hannah Lee at the terminal, chewing gum and scrolling through drone footage. "Hannah," Jennifer said softly, "I need a favor." Lee turned, uncertain. "What kind of favor?" "I need eyes on Hangar Bay 3 from 22:45 to 22:55 last night. I think someone accessed the control terminal." Hannah hesitated. "That's supposed to be restricted to senior command." "I know. That's why it matters." A pause, then she nodded, fingers flying over the keys. The video came up in a grainy black and white stream. For the first few minutes, the hangar sat still, floodlights humming above empty silence. Then, movement. A lone figure walking toward the terminal. The resolution wasn't sharp enough to catch details, but the posture was clear, confident, purposeful, the body language of someone who belonged. Jennifer leaned in. "Pause it there. Zoom." The badge glinted on the uniform. Not rank, not name, but enough. "Replay the walk," Jennifer said. "Watch the gate." Hannah narrowed her eyes. "That's Harper, isn't it?" Jennifer's jaw tightened. Yes. It didn't make sense. Until it did. Harper had always been too smooth, too liked, too good at skating just under the radar. He had access, he had charm. And if someone like Jennifer made waves, someone like Harper had every reason to make sure she sank before his own secrets did. That evening, Jennifer requested a private meeting with Colonel Ransom. She stood before him in his office, the data stick in her palm, the video loaded on her tablet. She waited until the room was quiet, the blinds drawn, the noise of the base muffled behind the thick door. "This," she said, "proves the override was planted. This," she tapped the video, "proves who did it." Ransom didn't reach for the evidence. He didn't interrupt. He just waited. "And before you say anything," she added, "yes, I accessed restricted logs. Yes, I traced buried code. Because if I didn't, I'd be walking into a dishonorable discharge, or worse." Ransom nodded slowly. "You're aware these accusations come with consequences." "I am," she said, "and I'm ready for them. Are you?" There was a pause, tense, brittle, heavy with possibility. Then Ransom reached out, took the tablet, and watched. When it ended, he looked up. Something in his expression had changed, not softened, but shifted. An acknowledgement, maybe, or the beginning of one. "I'll handle it," he said. Jennifer nodded. "Thank you, sir." As she turned to go, he added, "You could have kept quiet." "I've done that before," she said, without turning back. "Didn't get me far." That night, in the silence of her bunk, Jennifer felt something she hadn't allowed herself in months. Not victory, not yet, but something close to peace. The storm hit before sunrise. Jennifer stood under the flight canopy, wind needling her skin through her jacket as lightning flashed somewhere beyond the southern hills. The desert had turned to glass, brittle, hard, vibrating with electricity. And every bolt that split the sky felt like a countdown. The sky wasn't just angry, it was warning them. She hadn't slept. Not really. Word had gotten around as it always did. Harper was off the roster, quietly suspended. No details released, no headlines made. But everyone knew something had shifted. The glances Jennifer received were no longer tinged with suspicion. They carried something else now. Curiosity, caution, and something like respect, just barely visible under the surface. The mood across Liberty Ridge had changed, but so had the stakes. Major Armstrong's voice crackled over the base-wide comms, clipped and tense. "Storm front is shifting faster than projected. We're looking at a 2-hour window, max. Command has approved scramble if necessary. Prep all Iron Hawk." The storm wasn't just atmospheric. Intel had dropped overnight a hostile surveillance drone, confirmed over restricted airspace. Tensions were already tight after a recent near-miss in the region. A real conflict wasn't out of the question, which meant that the base, rattled by sabotage and haunted by distrust, now had to move as one. No hesitation, no excuses. Jennifer had been called to the command tent at 5:30. Ransom waited there, already reviewing flight data, his uniform damp from the rain, his brow furrowed in concentration. When she stepped in, he didn't look up right away. When he did, there was no trace of the usual skepticism in his eyes. "You're flying today," he said, just like that. Jennifer blinked. "Sir?" "You're on standby. Secondary pilot for Iron Hawk 1. Captain Delaney's main, but if anything happens. Engine failure? Injury? You're next." There was a beat of silence. "You're clearing me?" she asked. She tried to keep her voice steady, but the words still felt like too much. "Too soon." "I never grounded you," he replied. "Someone else did." "Based on lies?" "That's changed." Jennifer exhaled, slow and careful. "Understood." He met her eyes then. "This doesn't mean I trust you completely, but it means I'm watching." She gave a crisp nod. "Good. I want you to." The hangar was alive with motion. Crews worked with focused intensity, loading equipment, checking diagnostics, calibrating weapon systems. The usual pre-fleet ritual, but this time it felt different. No one joked, no one wandered. Everyone moved like something important was about to happen. And they were right. Delaney was already suited up, pacing beside Iron Hawk 1. His expression was tight, jaw clenched, the helmet in his hand almost shaking. Jennifer approached. "You good?" He nodded, too quickly. "Yeah, just pressure. Breathe slower. Don't forget to check your oxygen flow before engine spin." He looked at her. "You ever feel like you're not ready until you're already airborne?" She smiled faintly. "Every time." A voice cut through the comms. "All squadrons, be advised, storm intensity expected to double within the hour. Confirm fuel levels and target coordinates. Engage upon visual confirmation, no delays." The urgency in the air now felt personal. Jennifer wasn't just monitoring a screen or analyzing code. She was back in the arena. And despite everything, the grounding, the rumors, the sabotage, she felt calm, centered. She checked the loadout on Iron Hawk 1 herself, walking the length of the fighter's sleek body. The wings gleamed under the lights, wet with rain and humming with power. The storm roared in the distance, not yet overhead, but coming fast. Crews shouted, boots pounded across the pavement. A generator sputtered somewhere behind her. But all of it blurred as she reached up and placed one gloved hand on the aircraft's side. The cold metal welcomed her like an old friend. Overhead, the first real crack of thunder shook the ground. Moments later, the order came through. Scramble sequence, greenlit. 2 Iron Hawks launched clean, jet wash, roaring like thunder across the strip. Delaney climbed the ladder with tense precision, his gears snug, his eyes straight ahead. Jennifer stepped back, ready to monitor systems from the hangar console, when a shout came over the radio. "Delaney's out. Medical. Possible arrhythmia. Repeat. Iron Hawk 1, primary pilot down." Chaos erupted. Medics rushed in, voices colliding. Delaney was conscious but pale, struggling to breathe, slumped over near the cockpit stairs. Ransom appeared at a dead sprint, his expression unreadable. "We need a new pilot now," someone said. Without waiting for permission, Jennifer stepped forward. "I'm ready," she said. "I'm cleared. I know the bird." There was a pause. Just a second. Then Ransom's voice, low and firm, "Get in." She didn't hesitate. Climbing into the cockpit was like returning to a home she hadn't seen in years, but never forgot. Every switch, every readout, every vibration, it all came flooding back. The headset clicked into place. Ground control confirmed systems green. The bay doors opened wide, exposing the runway lit in flashes by the angry sky. "Fleming, confirm comms," the tower crackled. "Comms green," she answered, voice smooth. "Ironhawk 1 ready for launch." "Proceed. You are third out." The turbines roared behind her, the sound vibrating up through the frame and into her bones. She felt weightless, not just from the lift of takeoff, but from everything that had clung to her since Hollow Trace. Fear, shame, doubt. It was gone now, burned away by the fire of purpose. She took off into the storm. Rain lashed the canopy. Lightning danced to her left. The other jets maintained formation, their positions clean and sharp. Below, the drone signature flickered across radar. A hostile observer, fast and evasive, threading the edge of restricted airspace like a needle. Jennifer's voice was steady as she locked into formation. "Ironhawk 1, on your 6. Eyes on target, confirm visual." They spotted the drone seconds later, sleek, dark, moving with uncanny speed. Harper never would have held formation in this weather. He would have chased it solo. But Jennifer knew better. "Old pattern," she said over comms. "We box it in together." She anticipated the drone's evasive pattern, angled slightly west, and gave it just enough space to make a move. It took the bait, veering toward the edge of the storm. Right into the trap. Visual confirm, locking now. 2 seconds later, the drone's signal disappeared from radar. Clean kill. The sky stayed loud, the storm still raged, but inside the cockpit Jennifer was still. For the first time in too long, she wasn't proving anything. She was just flying. When they landed, the hangar erupted, not with chaos this time, but with something quieter. Admiration. Maybe even pride. Delaney was fine, resting. The others stood just inside the shelter, soaked but smiling. And Ransom was there, waiting. She pulled off her helmet, feeling the damp heat against her face. Ransom approached, his boots splashing through puddles. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her. Then, "You did good, Lieutenant." Jennifer looked him in the eye. "I know, sir." He gave a tight smile, then turned away. As the others gathered around her, laughter breaking through the storm, she felt something stronger than relief. She belonged here, not because someone allowed it, because she'd taken the seat when no one else could. And the storm, both outside and within, was finally clearing. The sky was clean now, clear as polished glass, as if the storm had come only to rinse the grime away. On the runway, from the aircraft, from the people walking its perimeter. The clouds had scattered like rumors exposed to daylight, and for the first time in months, the desert air carried no static, no sting. Just the low thrum of engines powering down and the quiet, steady rhythm of Liberty Ridge returning to itself. Jennifer stood at the edge of the flight line, still in her flight suit, boots damp from the morning puddles. Her helmet dangled from one hand, the other tucked in her jacket pocket. She wasn't in any rush, not anymore. After the last flight, the urgency was gone, not because things were fixed, not entirely, but because the worst of it had passed. And she had made it through. She watched as Ironhawk 2 taxied into position. Delaney was back in the cockpit today, fully cleared and grinning like a rookie again. His wave from the ladder wasn't just for the ground crew. It was for her. She nodded back. Subtle, but the message landed. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't have to turn to know it was Brooks. The way he walked was its own signature, measured, never hurried, with a certain unshakable weight in every step. He stopped beside her, arms folded. "You know," he said, "when you first got here, people thought you'd crack within a week." "I almost did," she admitted. "Twice." He chuckled. "Doesn't show." That's the point. They stood in silence a moment, both watching the crews at work. Gear was being packed, reports logged, jets fueled. Just another day. Except it wasn't. Not for her, not for any of them. "You hear what Command's doing?" Brooks asked. "I've heard rumors." "They're not rumors. Word is, Ransom sent up a full report, named you as instrumental in resolving the override incident. Recommended official commendation." Jennifer blinked. "He didn't strike me as the commendation type." Brooks smiled. "He's not, which is why it means something." She let that sit with her. She didn't need medals. She hadn't come to Liberty Ridge for recognition, but still, the thought that someone at the top had seen what she'd done, and not just what she'd been accused of, that meant more than she wanted to admit. They walked back toward the operations building. Inside, the lights felt warmer, the walls less suffocating. Maybe nothing had changed, or maybe everything had. As they passed the rec room, she caught sight of Harper. He sat alone on one of the benches, hands clasped between his knees, the swagger stripped from his frame. The hearing was still pending. There hadn't been an official charge yet, just the quiet removal from active duty, the internal probe. The polite silence of a man who'd finally run out of lies. Jennifer stopped, just for a second. Harper looked up. Their eyes met. No words passed between them. There was nothing left to say. She kept walking. Later that day, Colonel Ransom called her into his office. The windows were open, the desert wind carrying in a mix of sunlight and fine dust. His desk was cleaner than usual, his uniform jacket folded neatly over the back of his chair. He looked up as she entered and gestured for her to sit. "You handled yourself well," he said. "Thank you, sir. I didn't make it easy." Jennifer tilted her head. "That's not in the job description." He almost smiled at that. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Not the usual kind, thick with redacted pages and stamped in triplicate. This one was slim, new. "Your clearance is being reinstated," he said. "Effective immediately. Flight status, active, no restrictions." She took the folder, fingers tightening around it for a moment. "I thought that would take months." "It would have," he replied, "if you hadn't walked into hell and pulled this base out of it." She breathed in, slow and steady. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed. "But you led." She rose from her chair, the folder still in her hands, and gave him a crisp salute. For the first time, it didn't feel awkward. It felt earned. He returned it. "Dismissed, Lieutenant." She stepped out into the hallway. The corridor unusually quiet. There was no applause. No dramatic music. Just the hum of air vents and the quiet murmur of a base returning to order. But somehow it was enough. By evening, the sun began to set, bleeding across the desert in long strokes of orange and gold. Jennifer sat on a concrete bench near the comms tower, sipping bad coffee from a worse cup, watching the last rays of light settle over the flight line. Armstrong found her there, jacket half-zipped, a folder tucked under one arm. "Wanted to say something before the brass makes it official," she said. Jennifer looked up. "You reminded us all why we do this," Armstrong continued, "even when it's thankless. Especially then." Jennifer gave a quiet smile. "It's never really about the thanks, is it?" "No," Armstrong said, "but it's nice to be seen." They sat together for a while, not talking much, watching as the wind kicked dust along the tarmac and a lone C-17 banked west toward the horizon. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some perfect ending. But it was real. That night, the O Club filled with more bodies than usual. No formal celebration, no official ceremony. Just laughter, drinks, and the unspoken rhythm of people letting the pressure bleed out. Jennifer stepped inside cautiously, unsure if she belonged. Brooks waved her over. "You earned this." "I still don't drink," she said. "Then have a water, just don't vanish." She stayed, she talked, she even laughed, not performative laughter, but the kind that came from something deep and healed. Delaney raised a glass to her from across the room. Armstrong gave her a subtle nod, and even Ransom, seated at the bar, lifted his drink in her direction. Jennifer returned the gesture. Later, walking back to her quarters, the stars shone above, in a sky swept clean by the storm. No clouds, no alarms, just peace. She opened the door to her room, stepped inside, and placed the clearance folder on her desk. Next to it she laid her flight gloves, the same ones she'd carried since Holotrace, through exile, sabotage, and storms. She looked at them now, and realized something had shifted. They were no longer relics of what she had lost. They were proof of everything she had earned back. Jennifer Fleming was a pilot again, and this time, no one would take that from her.